The pink monkey bird is the Hamadryas baboon, which was considered a manifestation of Thoth. It was a sacred animal in Egypt. This is the bird-headed god, Thoth. He's Ra's advisor, the inventor of hieroglyphics and science.
Wow.
Welcome to another 1001 Album Complaints, the show where lifelong friends, musicians, and pedantic nerds get together to tell the backstory on the most influential albums of all time, as chronicled in Robert Dimery's book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Now, if you don't know today's album super well or not at all, no worries. We're going to guide you through it with lots of song clips while we dive into the backstory of this artist and this album. And along the way, we will be breaking these songs down musically, culturally, spiritually, to offer you some hilarious and sage musical commentary. And at the end of all that, we are going to vote on whether this album is really a must-listen before you die. Now, I must warn you that we came here to learn, but mostly to laugh and have fun. We are musicians ourselves. We understand how difficult it is to make truly great art, and we come from a place of love and respect for the craft. But we enjoy nitpicking and complaining, as the title of our show suggests. So bottom line, there are no sacred cows here. We won't be treating this artist or this album with any particular reverence. So you have been warned.
This one might be the one that gets the haters to come after us. David Bowie is one of those figures on a pedestal that everybody says is untouchable.
He's a god.
Not the case.
I think he's extremely touchable based on the backstory that I'm going to tell you.
Some of those videos, someone else's. Anyway.
So my name's Rob. I've been playing, performing, and recording music for 2 decades, and I've got opinions, dang it. Tonight, we're going to be discussing an album about which noted curmudgeonly wordsmith, Village Voice critic Robert Christgau wrote.
Ooh.
This is audacious stuff, right down to the stubborn wispiness of its sound. The singer's actorly intonations add humor and shades of meaning to the words, offering an unusually candid and detailed vantage on the rock star's world. B+.
Oh, that is high praise.
Wow. All right. Yeah.
I'm speaking, of course, about David Bowie's album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Let's get right to the music right now by playing a clip from the first and biggest single cut from this album. It is called The Way We Can Truly Begin the 200th Episode Celebration by introducing our panel of complainers for the evening with a particularly snarky, mean, tweet-length review. And I'm going to throw this one first over to Tom.
Thank you, Rob. Now, most of you, of course, know David Bowie as the star of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. But did you know he also had a musical career? On this album, he is also taking on a persona. In this case, acting like a guy who can write a decent lyric. And much like his film career, the results are mixed.
Boosh. Watch out, Dave.
Damn.
Next up, let's kick it over to Adam.
Hey, everybody. This is Adam, and my tweet is, David Bowie pulls off the least threatening alien invasion in all of science fiction, making Alf look like a xenomorph. Now, regardless, for the crime of creating an after-the-fact and loosely defined rock opera, and since deporting people is all the rage these days, I think Ziggy should be passenger number 1 on Elon's starship back to Mars.
Wow. Good thing he's already dead, because he wouldn't make it there otherwise.
The character's not. Ziggy lives on.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least, let's hear from Phil.
Crazed alcoholic cokehead bisexual reads Chariot of the Gods and fancies himself the new Ra, to the adulation and dismay of many.
Very, very nice. And this is Rob here. I, of course, have a tweet. But just to get you excited, we also have some listener-submitted tweets coming up next. But
Ooh, nice.
first up, this is my tweet. This is Rob here. Where camp meets cheese, Bowie shaves his eyebrows off to dress up some overwrought community theater cabaret.
I did have an Ethel Merman tweet that fell by the wayside where I was gonna sing. So
Too topical, Adam. Too
yeah,
topical.
So listen, this is our 200th episode celebration.
Damn.
Thank you, everyone, for coming on this journey with us. And to that end, we put it to you, our Patreon community, to submit some mean tweets about the album beforehand, and I'm going to read a select few here tonight.
I'm a little worried because the listener ones are always really good. So we'll see.
They're quite good, yes.
Here comes the first one. Patreon subscriber Kevin writes, in an era where claiming to be an alien messiah was somehow less controversial than being openly bisexual, Bowie's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars is what happens when a mime with a sci-fi obsession and a handful of guitar chords decides rock and roll just isn't theatrical enough.
Yeah, we have the
pretty
best
good.
fucking audience, I gotta say. Way to go, guys.
I know. Was that Kevin? That's good, man.
That's a good one. I got a couple more. Patreon subscriber Tyson writes, legendary shapeshifter known more for changing personas than great songs serves up a big old bowl of meh covered in glam sauce that you have to love because snooty rock critics say so.
I like glam sauce. That's really
There's
good.
your excuse to trash this album, Adam.
Yes, I am empowered.
And one last pithy tweet from Patreon subscriber Random Digits, who writes, it's no tin machine, but everyone has to start somewhere.
That's a well-researched boosh. I like it.
That one flew over my head, so that tells you where I'm coming in this week. I assume that's a Bowie reference?
That was David Bowie's band in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, so I want to move on to our general impressions, but I also wanted to mention, I'd be remiss if I did not mention that because it's our 200th episode, we did put this to a vote to that same Patreon community that submitted those tweets, and they voted, and that's how we chose Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. So this was an auspicious occasion. We appreciate you voting in that poll, and here we are. So, what'd you guys think of the record?
That was pretty great.
Yeah, overall, it's pretty damn good. I have one complaint. It's actually what Robert Christgau touched on, is that I don't think the mix is particularly great. I don't think that the tones that they go for are as full as they could be. And I know this predates the brick wall and all that shit and stuff that was produced in this era. It's one of the reasons why they get a lot of remastering and stuff like that to give them a little bit more kick. But some of the songs did sound a little demo-y almost, and they sounded a little bit
Yep.
missing some of the bombast that I think I was expecting from a rock and roll messiah record, you know?
I had no surprise to anybody listening, never heard this album end to end. So I didn't even know what was really on it until I looked at the actual track listing in Spotify. First time through, wasn't super impressed. Then I started reading a bit more and got a little more impressed and kind of understood where people were coming from. But then that kind of trailed off as well when I heard how it was actually put together, which I guess we'll get into in the story. But it was not this cohesive vision. It was kind of a bunch of different pieces that after the fact, he was like, well, maybe I could put this together to tell a story.
It's no Antichrist superstar, right, Adam?
Yes,
Precisely.
yes. Look, let me jump in here. We can't bury the lead. I don't mean any of what I said in my tweet. It was a tough exercise for me. I think the album is perfectly engineered, arranged, and performed, and it's a great serving of 70s space emo. I kind of agree with Tom that I think there may be a few complaints to levy against some of the lyric writing and maybe the mix, although I do think it was purposeful, but we'll talk about some of that. But I think a lot of those flaws, especially lyrically or in the songwriting generally, help it be more deeply human. So there's this interesting paradox to me of it being about an alien and about space, but it's really grounded in a vulnerable human emotion. And that's what I like about it.
Now, when you say that, did you approach the lyrics having been influenced from, I don't know, when you first listened to this, 25 years of people telling you that? Because my experience this week was going through the album 3 or 4 times and reading the lyrics, and I struggled. I thought some of it was a little too ambiguous, and there were spots that I didn't come away with that, basically. Now, I know I've said it on the podcast before. I'm not a lyrics guy, right? So sometimes I need people to say, this is a metaphor for this. But man, this was tough for me.
Let me qualify my position just slightly, as I'm sure I will do throughout the episode. No, I am not at all saying that he is a master lyricist by a long stretch. There are many people that are better lyrics writers than David Bowie. I will also tell you that there's no way I can approach this in an unbiased manner. This record got to me when I was probably 14.
I was about to ask, when did everybody first encounter this album in the experience that is the full vinyl or the full CD track?
That's a good question. I feel like I wasn't exposed to the record, like the whole record proper, probably until, Rob exposed me to it, when I was, I don't know, probably 17, 18 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, this was one of those ones that I feel like I started listening to it as a record, maybe more in like late college. You hear some of these songs on the radio and you classify them as such, not as part of a whole. You classify them as singles.
Totally. Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, this is a pretty good single. To your comment about the overarching theme of it, some of it felt pretty shoehorned. I will say that you could tell that some of these songs were not originally intended to be part of this overall tapestry of a story, but he does an admirable job of making it work. I think that the expectation of its cohesion is not even David Bowie's fault or even the album's fault. I think it's maybe the lore that has surrounded the album's fault.
Yeah, 20, 30 years of people, adding to this lore.
And we were talking about over 50 years now, to be clear.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I
Christ.
never saw it as a concept album, to be clear. So,
okay.
And I never really read about it or researched it until this week. So I am excited to share what I learned. I just feel like so many of the songs are extremely successful internally to themselves. That's all I know about it, right?
Okay.
More strikes than gutters. 100%. There are some absolute stunners on this album. I mean, just going through this first side of the album, which is what we're going to talk about here. Like the first side of the album it's not entirely unimpeachable, but the highs are really high and the lows are not that low.
Yeah, it's pretty great, no doubt.
Well, let me just say that to play against the concept record thing, as I dug into it this week, I started to realize that it is not a concept record. It is instead a writing prompt exercise. I do think that David Bowie made up this character. We're going to talk about how he got to that. We're going to get to all that in the story. And he used it as a writing prompt, and it made me realize I don't think I'd ever consciously taken that in. David Bowie was always a huge influence on me and my aesthetic and theatricality and music and things like that we've all been through in bands together. But it just reminded me of the writing prompts we've been doing with Beverly Crushers, the upcoming Ghostbusters record,
Right.
Ghost Beef.
All of which have songs about everybody in the band having huge packages. That was really
Exactly.
that was my takeaway, which is, hey, if you're writing the song,
Don't leave out the ass.
Yeah.
No, listen, this is what I like, though. Just to be clear, this is what I'm going to be harping on. It does feel like a piece of very, very personal, vulnerable, almost embarrassingly personal art to me. I think it was meant to be listened to alone because it makes me feel feelings. And I think Bowie's vocal performance has a lot to do with that. He sells a lot of the lyrics in a way that the lyrics themselves written down on paper don't really do much for me. Right. And I think that he, more so than the other, let's say, titans of classic rock, like the Beatles or Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin, is able to hit at a deep, raw emotionality that those other things are sometimes lacking. Obviously, the Beatles hit it sometimes, but not consistently across the catalog. That's what I like about David Bowie.
I feel like the Beatles hit it more in the heartfelt love song arena. They do that quite well. They don't do a whole lot of my life is fucking falling apart, type of vulnerability in their songs. Mm-hmm. And I give Bowie a lot of credit for that. And you're right, he does sell it with his vocal performance. Honestly, the one thing that I found listening this week, I was thinking about how much deeper his voice got over the course of his career. Like towards the end of his career, he was singing a lot more low and more powerfully. And this is a little bit more nasally, and not that it's bad. It's just a totally different presentation. And if I'm being honest, I have to say that I kind of like his lower, deeper voice a little bit better. That might have been a product of the fact that he was a smoker for like his entire life, and
That'll do it.
your voice just degrades over time.
I'm sure it's some of that. It's some of him discovering different styles, because of course he's known, even to people who don't know the catalog, as a chameleon who continued to change styles, and that includes singing style. But I think he had a deep register if you go back even an album to stuff like Changes. He starts pretty deep.
Yeah.
You know, I think he does make a lot of very conscious vocal choices throughout his material. And I agree it's nasally, and you could impugn them if you want. But I think, and from the research I did, he came into the studio for this with the eye of the tiger. He just knew exactly what he wanted to do, to the point where he was kind of bossing people around. They did it very efficiently, and he had a clear vision for how he wanted it to sound, and that included his own voice.
Yeah, I certainly heard him turning on the nasaliness on and off throughout some of these songs. I think there's a song we'll get to at some point where it feels like it's two separate characters, and one is very here, and then the other gets kind of clean and flat, and it's noticeable.
I definitely think there's a lot of singing in character on the record, and there's a lot of shape-shifting in that way, taking on personas.
He's extremely influenced by theater, and we can talk about some of that in the backstory.
I wonder what outfits he was wearing in the studio. Was he going full on rock star garb? Like, and they're like, David, it's like 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, man. What are you doing? He's like, I'm fucking in character, man. I'm committed to this. I have my spangles on.
Here's a question for you guys now. Had you seen the Ziggy Stardust character before you heard the album? Because I wonder, going back into 1972, if this didn't grow legs until the spectacle that was David Bowie touring as Ziggy Stardust, and people going, what the hell is this? There's an album that accompanies it? Whoa!
I always sort of like pre-listening to Bowie, like learning anything about it, I always imagined he burst onto the scene as Ziggy.
Right.
And took the mask off later. That's not what happened, but
Right.
I definitely
But in your
always,
head, yeah.
in my head, that was like more fun.
Yeah,
and I
totally.
always thought that that's the way it happened, right?
I think those questions are going to be answered in our
Excellent.
story. And in the interest of time, let's move on, and we'll have a little more to say about our general impressions later. So before we get the story started, I do want to say, feel free to throw as many slings and arrows at my personal hero as you like, guys. But it's not going to change my opinion of David Bowie.
Rob, did you think we were going to hold back to spare your feelings or something, Rob?
The 200th episode, we all decide to really just tone it back a bit.
I'm just pointing out to the audience that he does happen to mean a lot to me. But even still, doesn't mean I can't make fun of him, and I will, along with you guys. And that's just the nature of us as humans.
It's part of being part of the brotherhood.
Yes, exactly. Because I love learning about this. I was really excited to learn about and research this record that I've been listening to for most of my life. And I just wanted to say before we start that Bowie doesn't really give up a ton of personal information in interviews about himself. He likes to remain a little mysterious. Perhaps that's not a surprise. So I'm going to liberally reference a biography I read about him by a guy called Mark Spitz. The biography is just called Bowie. But truthfully, a lot of this information is secondhand. I noticed that. It was hard to get him to sit down and really speak personally.
Oh, the great thing is that you could just make shit up then. And he's dead. He's not even going to be able to contradict you anymore.
And the lore grows.
Rob, that's interesting because in the documentary Moon Age Daydream, there are definitely a couple of scenes they allude to this, but they can't unpack it. They sort of show some gotcha moments with journalists when he's young, and he just sort of freezes, and the interview sort of just ends. There are certain places he's not going to go, and he doesn't.
And I thought when I watched Moon Age Daydream, which was a recent documentary, although strange and artsy in its approach, certainly, which is appropriate for its subject, it was like they took every ounce of tape of Bowie talking about himself and cut it together. And you could kind of see that there really wasn't that much.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? For as much as he was a public persona, he did not talk about his family and things like that often.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Full 90 seconds of material over a 40-year career.
That is good to not talk about your family because, like, they didn't ask to be family members with a legendary rock star, and getting blown up that way is not great.
And that's a great segue to us talking about another man's family. So David Robert Jones was born in 1947 in Brixton, South London, a coal dust and boiled potatoes kind of place. This is just post-war. His family is working class, and he was born in the family home, which actually wasn't that uncommon in those days. And there's a story about how the midwife who helped deliver him at home is said to have commented about the newborn baby to the mother with "This child has been on this earth before."
Oh, I thought you were going to say this child's got a gigantic wang.
God-given ass, my lady. That's what I'd say.
And what a boy.
So he grows up with these two step siblings, but he's technically the only child of his parents. He has a sister from his father's previous relationship, and from his mother's past, he has this much older half brother, Terry. He's about 10 years ahead of him. He becomes one of his biggest influences. This is classic South London Brady Bunch stuff. So, by all accounts, Bowie's a weird kid. No surprise there.
Oh, man. Can't imagine him on the playground.
He's fascinated by outer space. He's obsessed with jazz. And at the age of 3, he's trying on makeup. And they talk about how there's this generation gap happening in Britain and even within the David Jones home, which is that his older brother, 10 years older, is a war baby, born in 1937. The whole upbringing is in the context of war. And Bowie is of the next generation, the baby boomers, but he's also a TV baby. There's always a TV in the house. That's kind of what's raising him. It's a sea change for how a generation sees the world or how much of it they see.
So you're telling me that I should just plop my kids in front of the TV and then eventually they'll be able to pay for my retirement with their gold records?
Worked for us, Tom. So when he's a kid, he moves to another South London suburb called Bromley. It's a sleepy suburb. He mostly grows up there. And they talk about how his childhood bedroom is right above a pub, like an outdoor pub. So every night he's falling asleep to the sound of drunks arguing about football or politics or whatever drunk people in the 50s talked about. And he partially credits this with helping him develop a very deep, some might say alien, curiosity about human nature. So flash forward to age 12, he picks up the saxophone, his first instrument. And this is after falling in love with the cool, brooding sound of baritone saxophonist Jerry Mulligan, who's a guy who played with Chet Baker, amongst many others. That, plus, as we know, saxophone was the main lead instrument in all those early rock and roll recordings like Little Richard, right? So it was a cool instrument at the time. And even though he's working class, his dad tends to dote on him. He has a nice, loving parents. His dad immediately buys him, I think, a plastic sax to practice on, which I don't know how good that was. By the way, he specifically picks baritone saxophone, which is weird.
Well, he's got to get low,
Oh, yeah.
He's got to get low, man. So he's a precocious kid, right? And early on, he tracks down the best sax player in Bromley. And even though this guy does not give lessons, he somehow convinces him to teach a 12-year-old. So he's persuasive, even as a young kid. Now, interestingly enough, this same guy, Bowie, eventually pays it forward more than a decade later, or maybe 2 decades later, by having this guy do the iconic sax solo on Walk on the Wild Side. So that's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Another fun anecdote that speaks to his outsider perception of things is that one of the first bits of rock and roll he heard was when his dad brought home some 45s, including Little Richard's Tutti Frutti, which we recently covered on the show.
Yeah.
Great record.
David Bowie falls in love with it immediately. He says, "I had heard God." But the funny thing was that he said when it first came home, the family record player only played at 78 speed, and it's a 45.
That's lightning fast.
So he was there like trying to spin it with his finger or slow it down. It's like garbled, semi-experimental, strange right away.
Yeah. Like, let's see Pat Boone do this version. 78 version.
Crank it up.
But definitely he's a huge Little Richard fan. I heard him throughout his life talk about how much of an influence that early rock and roll, and particularly Little Richard, had on him. Now onto his appearance. At age 13, his best mate punched him right in the eye on the schoolyard after a spat about a girl. And by dumb luck, unfortunate luck, a fingernail scratched his cornea and he had to go in for surgery. And they initially thought he might lose the eye or at least lose sight in the eye. But instead, he can see out of it, but he came away with permanent damage. The muscles that control his pupil dilation don't work. His eye is permanently dilated.
Wow.
So he can still see out of it, but it gives him an eerie, mismatched 2 different eye color quality.
Yeah. How old was he again?
13.
Man.
He basically always looks like he has a concussion, right? Just like the...
Which eye is it again? Do you know?
It's just left eye, I think.
Yeah, it is. I'm looking at a picture right here. It's his left eye.
Well, what I think is telling is that even at 13, Bowie being Bowie, he immediately leans into it. he likes being off-putting and alien. He likes the mystique and the attention that it garners him. He is a fame whore from day one. Let's make no mistake about that. And remember, this is an era, and it is for a long time after this, where no one can fact-check anything you say. So you can just say anything about that eye.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man. Yeah, that sounds fun.
So for high school, he ends up going to what's called technical school, which is sort of like art school meets trade school meets high school. This is still in his sleepy London suburb called Bromley, and they're teaching kids to go to work in corporate graphic design gigs. It's not at all about expressing creativity or finding your bliss or anything like that, but it's about learning design techniques. And he gets deeper into music while he's there. He picks up some guitar, he picks up some piano, and by the time he graduates at 16, he's convinced that he wants to be a professional musician. So persuasive that he is, he goes to the guidance counselor. He tells him everything he wants to do. He's looking for advice. And the guidance counselor says, you should get a job at the Bromley Harp Factory.
Wow.
The place where harps were made.
They had a factory. It wasn't just one guy supplying enough for all of Bromley. They needed a factory.
Harps were they cranking out every day? Just another truckload of harps out the door.
It was high times for the harps there in the early 60s.
Harp was having a renaissance.
Yeah.
You know?
It was.
So unfortunately, the harp industry has fallen on hard times. It's a good thing you didn't choose that line of work.
Especially in Bromley.
Now, side note, the cool teacher at this high school who really encouraged his artistic side was a guy called Mr. Frampton, father of Peter Frampton, who was also a classmate.
No way. Wow.
That is interesting.
Is that why Peter Frampton got a career? Because I can't think of any other reason why.
Actually, Frampton had hits before Bowie. We're going to get to that part in the story.
Ooh.
So instead of making harps on the assembly line, he gets a graphic design job in London, and it was at a firm that had clients that included the dietary cookie known by the brand name AIDS.
Wow.
Which is just a fun bit of unfortunate company naming from back in the day.
Yeah.
The D was for digestive, I guarantee it.
Yeah. And the rest of it was for AIDS. Let me ask you this, Rob. Is this before or after he becomes I believe, founding member of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Long-Haired Men? Because I know that was
No, I didn't hear
1964.
about that one.
Yeah. It's just like he appeared on BBC in like 1964 as part of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Long-Haired Men, being like, we're just like you, just because we have long, stylish hair. Don't beat us up on the streets.
That's hilarious. Because they talked about how he was obviously very fashion forward and trying to keep up with the trends. And in London, kind of in the Beatles era, it was all about mod culture, which was sort of the Beatle cut and the hip fashion, that kind of tight, maybe a leather jacket, maybe you're riding a moped, and then it transitioned into hippies with even longer hair and like flower power and things of that nature. So he made some transitions, but at this point, he's in high school, or his high school band, where he just plays saxophone and he doesn't sing. He started being in bands. He has a band called George and the Dragons. Again, he's not the front. He's just a saxophone player. And by the time high school ends, they transition to a band called the Conrads. They're playing teenage parties out in the suburbs. They're doing cover songs heavily featuring saxophone, like, for instance, Tequila by the Champs.
Ooh.
I can't think of another song that features saxophone so heavily, but Yakety Sax, perhaps. But actually, they're a local hit, and they even record a single for Decca Records, the record label that the Rolling Stones were on. But, and this begins a trend for David, he quickly realizes that he wants more. His ambition is much, much bigger than any one band. And when Decca declines to re-up them after the single goes nowhere, he quits. And we'll skip ahead here because this becomes a pattern for a while. He cycled through a series of short-lived bands, including the Hooker Brothers, the King Bees, the Manish Boys.
Nice.
And by the way, all of them, you'll notice, have names that sound like they should be playing a dive bar in Mississippi, not London.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, this is the era when every white kid in London wanted desperately to be a blues man from Memphis.
As was the style at the time.
Yeah, Manish Boy was the Muddy Waters song.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
That was the coolest thing to be. And we've talked about it before on the show. That was an era where the blues musicians from America were actually getting better paying gigs. They were more famous in the UK than they were in America at that time.
Yeah.
And they could drink out of the same water fountains as everybody else, too, with the UK.
That too. There's a long history of black American musicians being treated much, much better in Europe. That goes all the way back to the jazz era. But okay, at this point, David Jones has decided on a stage name, something to evoke just how different a person he was on stage versus off. So David Jones becomes Davy Jones. That's right. We're in the pirate phase.
First persona he took on was frilly shirts and what. He's like, I'm already halfway there with my outfit, so I might as well just go full pirate.
He's in a band called the King Bees. They record a single, and this is, to my knowledge, the first recording of Bowie, at least that is generally accessible. So we'll go ahead and put it on the playlist for you. It's called Liza Jane. He's singing at this point. It's issued originally under the name Davy Jones and the King Bees, but now you can find it on Spotify under David Bowie. And he has started over this several bands to move out in front of these groups and start to stand out as the clear star. And I think it's in part because of the way he's positioned himself, and in part because he's very charming. People do like him, and people are recognizing his talent.
Is he singing yet, or he's still just blasting sax?
He's singing by this point. Yes, correct. He's singing.
Okay, good.
He sings on Liza Jane.
I'm going to guess also that the style has gotten a little tighter in the pants, and said, like, we got to put this out front. We just got to know what's going on with this.
I think ultimately this story is about one of just raw ambition. And David Bowie, I think he became a nicer person over his life, but he stepped on a lot of people to get where he was going. And so I think he just was relentless about getting to star status. And as we're going to see, there are many steps left in his journey to actually get to true world star, which really only happens with this record we're talking about. So at this point, he's feeling good about his chances in the music business. He quits his day job. He decides to go all in on music. I also get the sense, believe it or not, that he believes in committing fully to whatever it is you're trying to do. That is going to be a through line in the rest of his life. For instance, orange hair or cocaine. And at this point, he's sending letters to every person in the industry he can find a mailing address for, telling him how great he is, how he's the next Beatles, how they should sign him. And somehow that works. He gets a manager. And, by the way, kids, I think that still works. You should try that approach. That's not bad.
Yeah.
I wonder if he wrote it in the third person about himself, like Davy Jones is a star that is taking hold across, instead of I'm awesome, listen to me. Interested in the approach.
Well, and also, I don't feel like it probably takes all that much to get a manager. They're just like, yeah, man, I'll like make some calls or something, and if you get any gigs, I'll take 10-15% of that.
Right.
You know,
That's a good point.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a good point. They're not really promising much at the outset. And in fact, here comes the next anecdote that will prove your theory correct, Tom, because this is right around the time that he meets Mark Bolan of T-Rex. This is pre-T-Rex, of course. And recall, we talked about this on our T-Rex Electric Warrior episode many moons ago, that they have the same manager, and they're making a little extra cash by painting that manager's London office over the weekend. So that's how they meet. They hit it off right away on music and fashion.
And then they later become cocaine-fueled vampires together.
Exactly. But at this point, they're like 16 or 17. They're not very old, because you graduate high school younger in the UK. So he's out on his own as a pro, I think, by 17. So the King Bees single, Liza Jane, doesn't do too much. So, of course, Bowie quits that, and his new manager basically forces him on another group called the Manish Boys, claiming that an American tour promoter will only book them if David is in the group. And I just love the idea that there's some dudes out there who were pressured to add David Bowie to their struggling rock and roll band.
No, we don't need charisma. Come on.
So as you can see, each step he's getting just a smidge closer to stardom. The Manish Boys actually opened for the Kinks on a UK tour when they're hot off of their You Really Got Me single fame. But still, it's not enough. He quits. He joins another band called The Lower Third. Then he quits that. He joins another band called The Buzz. It's like, damn, dude. Just passing through these things.
That's wild. And that's the short stints, I assume? Like what, 6 months-ish?
Pretty short stints. Like once he realizes that it doesn't have legs, either because they record a single that goes nowhere or whatever, he's like, I can't stay in one place too long. I have a mission. He's like a little kid who decided early that he was going to be president. David Bowie seems like he just decided he had to be a world famous rock star, and he wasn't going to let any band or friendship get in his way.
That's kind of awesome.
It's also kind of interesting that he wasn't getting tarred with the brush of failure for any of these projects. He somehow managed to keep himself sort of aloof of that and be like, this project failed. Like the last 6 projects I've been in failed, but I know I'm the only constant in all these failures, but it's not me.
It's not me, right?
It's like you planned my segue, Tom, because believe me, that brush of failure is coming. Bottom line is he's getting lots of shots on goal, but nothing is taking off. And at least in his perception, he's like 19 in about 1966. He feels washed up, like he missed his chance.
Oh, he's totally washed up. Man, by now your life is over at like 22.
That's insane.
Yeah, you got to go see if there's an accordion factory that's hiring or
To the point where even Peter Frampton, who's the same age as him, maybe even slightly younger, had scored a hit. I think it's with the band he was in before Humble Pie. And he's like, God damn, even Frampton's ahead of me. Like, what am I doing with my life?
This no talent suck. He's got a hit. Come on. I'm sorry. I've never liked Frampton.
All right. Is he on the list?
Frampton Comes Alive is definitely on the list.
All right.
Yeah, he's on my list, but that's a different list.
But the good news is he's getting experience. And as the culture turns away from blues music and into psychedelia, Bowie's being influenced by the theatrical British music, campy stuff. He starts to find a style that actually suits him better. Because again, if you go back and listen to Liza Jane, it just sounds like a Rolling Stones copy, basically, like early Rolling Stones, that kind of bluesy UK sound. It's not distinguished in any way. So he finally kind of starts to lock into something. Now, I should mention that homosexuality had just effectively been legalized in 1967 in the UK. He's leaning into that more and more, into the androgynous fashion and a variety of romantic relationships across the gender spectrum. And I was interested in that little factoid about homosexuality being effectively legalized in 1967 in the UK. So I decided to pull some other years where homosexuality was effectively legalized in other countries.
All right.
In East Germany, it was legalized in 1968.
Okay.
Yeah.
West Germany followed the next year. In France, it was decriminalized during the French Revolution in 1791.
There we go. France always on the progressive side.
Yeah.
And in the U.S., 2003.
Was that the year the last law, like in the...
I was going to say, you might have to put an asterisk on that because it might be coming back around to illegal pretty soon.
The night is young. Yeah, pretty ridiculous. Pretty ridiculous. But this was something that was going on in London at the time. So in 1967, Davy Jones, sadly, hears tell of a new American television show directly aping the Beatles about one of the stars of that show being a British stage actor called Davy Jones.
He must have been so pissed.
Oh, no. The name.
And of course, I'm talking about the Monkees, which we also covered kind of recently. So he thinks it through and he settles on David Bowie, named after the American badass, and also a knife named after that guy.
Hell yeah.
Now, by the way, just going to clear up some pronunciation stuff on the name right now. David Bowie consistently pronounces his name Bowie, the way we're doing it right now. But British people would typically see that name and say Bowie. And apart from that, a third way, I've also heard people say Bowie sometimes.
Well, that's how the American name is pronounced. That's how the knife is pronounced. It was Jim Bowie.
It's a Bowie
the
knife,
Bowie
right.
Yeah.
And I think Weird Al's friend in UHF, his actual name is David Bowie. And I don't know, I'll have to call him and see how he pronounces it. UHF trivia. All right.
Well, you're talking about like the actor's name?
Yes, the
David
actor's
Bowie?
name, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It
his buddy.
definitely wasn't the name of the character. I wouldn't.
No, it was not. Yeah.
That would have come up.
It's actually pronounced Spadowski, Adam.
And now that David has become Bowie, the world will never be the same. And this brings us to our very favorite segment on the show. It's David Bowie by the numbers.
Yes.
Now, I should point out for longtime listeners of the show, we have covered David Bowie in the past on the Station to Station episode, but we didn't cover any of this backstory before. We really focused on what was going on around the time of that record specifically. So this by the numbers is going to be a little bit expansive to David Bowie's whole career. First number I want to throw out to you is over 100 million. That's the record sold just in Bowie's lifetime. He is one of the best-selling musicians of all time.
Damn.
9 platinum albums in the UK, 11 gold, 8 silver, and 5 platinum albums in the US with 9 gold.
Nuts.
And it's difficult to cross over between the US and the UK like that, right? Like only the giants.
And to do it that many times, and as you're going to see, really in different genres, honestly.
Yeah, different styles, definitely. Well, he put out a lot of volume. That man's got quite the discography.
Well, he was around for a long time, and he consistently made music. So that is true in that sense, certainly. But I think almost everything he did was purposeful, even though some of the experiments were certainly less successful. He wasn't like churning crap out or doing standards records.
No.
I take that back. He did do one record of covers in the 70s when he was super coked out. But okay, next number, 29. A BBC poll in 2002 ranked him the 29th most important Briton ever, ranking below Shakespeare, Queen Victoria, and Paul McCartney, but well above Charles Dickens, Charlie Chaplin, and John Peel. That's for you, audience members who are constantly bringing up John Peel and his various recommendations. And yet, when David Bowie was offered knighthood in 2003, he declined.
Really?
Baller move.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a total baller move. Man, that'd be great.
That's punk.
Tell the queen no. Yes, that is
Sorry.
punk. Nice.
All right, next number on my list is 8, as in 8 albums on the 1001 list, including the album Black Star, released on his 69th birthday and 2 days before his death and about his death.
Oh.
And by the way, that is not including albums on the list where Bowie gets only a producer credit, which would expand it to at least 4 more.
Damn. Is that the most on the list? Most prolific?
It could be. You can see how it's a little hard to track that stat, but that might be. I think Neil Young and the Beatles, of course, are also up there. He's also got 5 albums on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time, 7 songs on their companion list of 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. And next number 1. I found this stat interesting. Bowie is the top-selling vinyl artist of the 21st century, beating even the Beatles, both in aggregate and in each decade individually.
All right. Hell yeah.
Pretty badass.
The legacy lives on. And lastly, 0. As in, it costs $0, dear audience, to support us by joining our Patreon community for a free trial.
What?
And it's $5 a month after that. You can check out the hours upon hours of bonus content, including the very soon to premiere latest edition of our Guilty Pleasures series, where we admit to liking the schlockiest of schlock in front of our oldest friends so that they can shame us appropriately. And of course, you can join the conversation with us after the show. Cast your own vote on this album here. Help us choose other albums to cover in the future. Seriously, we love all of you, and this show takes a lot of time to produce. So join Patreon today to help out your fellow complainers.
Hell yeah.
Okay, back to the story. Bowie, he's finally ready to make his debut album, and it goes absolutely nowhere. In fact, it's embarrassing to most Bowie fans, including this one, with songs like Rubber Band and The Laughing Gnome, which features a high-pitched gnome talking to him in the song.
Oh my God.
It's pretty bad, even for me. Listen to The Laughing Gnome. It'll definitely be on the playlist.
There we go. All right.
At this point, again, he's like 19, 20. David considers joining a monastery, removing himself from Western life entirely, sealing himself up in a cave to meditate. He's really into Buddhism.
Also a punk move.
Wow. He thinks he's that much of a failure.
But 2 things keep him going just a bit longer. Number 1, he meets a young Tony Visconti, a Brooklyn-born producer and engineer who's just a couple years older than David, and they hit it off right away. This guy's also a bass player, and together they would end up collaborating and touring together on and off for the rest of Bowie's career. And most importantly, it sounds like this guy Tony Visconti became an instant older brother figure. And they had a relationship, a friendship, really, through to David's death. They start work on a second album for Bowie, and David Bowie brings the song Space Oddity to the sessions. Now, Visconti is the stated producer, but he passes entirely, even though they're friends, thinking that it is a cynical space race cash grab.
Oh.
So the engineer who's working at the studio at the time, Gus Dudgeon, who's never produced anything, steps in on that track only.
Interesting.
Damn.
So do you think that is Gus's vision for the track, or do you think it's more Gus getting out of the way and just letting Bowie be like, yeah, bring in that, tuba or whatever hits that thing at the end of the musical section.
We didn't write the segue, Phil, but this is a great segue because I was about to speak to exactly that point. I think it's a little bit of both, of course, but one of the things they talked about was this was right at the moment in time where it was a sea change of producers being the total boss of the studio versus being a conduit to express an artist's vision. And Gus Dudgeon, being a young guy, he's of that new school. And his whole goal is to bring David Bowie's vision to life with this track. So I should also point out, I thought this was interesting context for Space Oddity, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. It was a bit of a risk because, in part because of its connection to current events. This is happening right before the moon landing mission in 1969.
Wow.
It literally comes out the week of the moon landing mission. They produced the heck out of the track, obviously, big lush orchestration, but if those astronauts die, no one is going to play this song.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can't even go viral. Like, I feel like nowadays they'd be like, oh, now I'm going to make so much money. The astronauts died. It's going to be a big hit. But back then,
God.
probably not as much.
So a risky move, slightly less risky than being an astronaut, but still. Now, I should mention that he's still buddies with Mark Bolan at this point, and it's Mark Bolan who suggests he uses that stylophone pocket synth thing, which they're still serving me ads on Instagram about buying a stylophone because David Bowie used it on Space Oddity.
Oh, that little black and silver thing with like the pencil.
Exactly. That was Mark Bolan's suggestion for the song. And I also just wanted to mention, because we just talked about him in a previous episode, the bass player on Space Oddity is Herbie Flowers. He plays on some of the Harry Nilsson tracks, including Jump Into the Fire, which has the most recognizable bass line. And he also plays the Walk on the Wild Side bass line and wrote it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's the upright. That's a smooth. It's a smooth roller.
And also on Space Oddity is a pre-Yes Rick Wakeman playing the Mellotron.
Sick.
No way. That's awesome.
You know that Walk on the Wild Side bass line? For years and years and years, I was trying to figure out how to play it. It's two parts. One part is a slide up and one part's a slide down, and you can't really do them at the same time on an upright because you can't do the tap and slide down. So it annoyed the shit out of me. I was like, oh, that's just two parts.
Why can't I do this? I suck. No, you don't have four hands. You're good.
David Bowie mixed it too good, bro.
Yeah, he did. So, Rob, at what point was he like, I just released an album called David Bowie, huge flop. I should call my next album David Bowie. When did he make that decision? Because that seemed like a bizarre choice.
We're gonna breeze a little by that in the interest of time, but we're getting there. I agree. He had some interesting ideas, and you're gonna see how things really start to crystallize for him. We're actually not there yet, believe it or not. I wanted to mention, we're not gonna get another chance, likely, on the podcast to talk about Space Oddity, which is a terrific song, I think, and it is the first way David Bowie is truly introduced to the world. But one thing I thought was cool was that in a brilliant piece of guerrilla marketing, the song's first public airing was blasting over the loudspeakers before a Rolling Stones concert in memory of the recently deceased Brian Jones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the song gets released and it only gets to 45 in the UK. Oh, and the astronauts did successfully land on the moon, in case you were wondering. Don't want to keep you in suspense. Now, it does end up on the moon. It does end up getting a re-release a short time later. It becomes a bigger hit that time around, number 5. But what's important is that, to my mind, it feels original even today. It's the first thing he does that doesn't sound like his influences. Gus Dudgeon, like we said, he was this younger generation. He wanted to help bring Bowie's vision to life. And we're still in a rise of music being an artist's medium as opposed to a producer's medium era here.
You know, Adam, not to pad this episode too much with talking about panning, but I remember you talking about back in the day that's how your dad taught you to sing harmony was with Space Oddity, because it's 2 tracks and 2 different speakers. And I use that technique myself, and it is shockingly effective.
It is a really good song to try to learn to sing harmony to. So if you're looking to start that, or Donald Fagen's song Ruby on the Nightfly, which is like episode 4 of this podcast.
Yeah, because what you mean is oftentimes it can be hard to pick out which line is the harmony line because they're mixed kind of center and you can't pull them apart. And this is a way to effectively isolate the harmony line in your ear.
Yeah, you can just take a headphone out.
And if you're in a 1984 Toyota Tercel station wagon, cranked, which is where my dad would do it, you would hear one vocal on the left and one on the right. We would each take the one on our side.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So out of this, Bowie gets some name recognition and a little motivation to finish up the album, for which Space Oddity...
Because of the stereo mix.
Because of the stereo mix, and because he heard that young Adam learned how to sing harmony from the 45 copy.
By the way, in that 1987 Toyota Tercel, this was like 1998 that you ever in that car, by the way. This wasn't 87, 88.
It was not. It was quite far in the future.
But look, it was not the smash hit he wanted. T-Rex, Mark Bolan, his old pal, is taking off, and he's still standing right there. He's starting to think it's time for a change. It might be his management. His manager is a guy from the older generation who doesn't understand where music and art is headed, and Bowie is on the lookout for the next move. And then, one night, at the release party for King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King, he meets the woman who would change everything, Angie. To be continued. Dun, dun, dun.
No. Love it. Love it.
Stay tuned in next week's episode for the continuation of this story as Bowie realizes his true vision for rock stardom and compiles the Spiders from Mars band, not to mention the persona that is Ziggy Stardust, and records the album and heads out on tour. We're going to get to that next week in this two-parter. I hope you are excited to get to that. But now, let's get to talking about some songs on side one, shall we, gents?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
First up, we are going to put on the opening track. It is called...
Trivia about this song. If you take a sip of your drink every time he says 5 years, by the end of the song, you will have drank 5 beers.
Listen, I love it.
That's awesome.
It's maybe my favorite song on the whole album. I still get shivers listening to it. I love when songs are able to just loop and still create throbbing emotional climaxes out of them. It's just this like relentlessly simple song. I don't think the drummer changes at all throughout the song.
He does some fills, but yeah, it's the same basic beat the entire time. And I will agree. I think this song is pretty successful. I've always kind of liked this song. Frankly, one of the reasons I was kind of like this song is because when I was first learning how to play the drums, I could play it. I was like, oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah. It's got that sick, nice little drum beat in the middle or in the opening.
Yeah, it's not your same old boom cha. It's got a little something extra, to learn there.
Well, something. Yeah.
The stage direction was hopelessness in a drum beat.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, do you think this like a guitar pick being drug across the piano, do you think that's a reference to the hopelessness of working in a harp factory? Because it kind of has a harp.
That's good.
So like we said, this is intended as a bummer song. The premise is that for whatever reason, Earth is going to end in 5 years' time, and people are just learning about it. And it's about a society reacting to that in various ways.
Like, I got to kill some fucking kids. That's what I got to do.
Yeah, I thought that the story came across in like the first couple lines, and then the rest of it, I was really trying to put it together and be like, oh, okay, maybe the milkshake, or I forget the lines that it was, but it's just like the lore, because I went in and I read about the song and it said it's about the Earth is ending in 5 years because he blatantly says that we've got 5 years left. The newsman saying it, and then everything else, I was just like, what?
Yeah. It's a nice juxtaposition of a bunch of people reacting in like different and probably equally terrible ways to learning that. But then it always cracks me up when he's like, I saw you in an ice cream parlor, and he's like smiling and waving and looking so nice. I'm like, okay, Dave, I get the contrast, but it's a little much.
Very Broadway.
Listen, I do think that once you accept that this song is great, you'll kind of get what Bowie is about. I do think it's kind of a stereotypical David Bowie song. It's lyrically kind of stereotypical for him. He likes, again, he's wringing the emotion out of his vocal take. It's kind of just escalating. And I think he gets off a lot of great lines, but admittedly, there's a lot of nonsense in there. It was cold and it rained and I felt like an actor. I don't know, that resonates with me. I like that. I like that line a lot.
I like that line a lot. Yeah, that's a good line.
I like that line. I wrote that down as one of the ones that stuck out to me, yeah.
And then we haven't really talked much yet. I mean, there's more time for it, obviously, about the orchestration. So Mick Ronson, the guitar player, is coming in with these string arrangements. I think they're really lovely. He's also the guy playing electric guitar and piano. He's doing a lot, actually. We're giving Bowie a lot of credit.
So these electric guitar, like I think the end of this song, starting at about 4 minutes, is a great example. He is just blasting some shit out of left field. Like it is kind of nuts, the guitar solo he brings in here. It's long and sort of spacious. It's not like a Van Halen shredder, but like this guy has a sound. He has a point of view that is pretty.
It's really good, honestly. And I think they're good at arrangements. And we'll get to this in the next episode of the story, but they didn't have very much time at all. Bowie was I introduced the song, you play it maybe twice, we're then recording it in maybe 2 takes.
Jeez.
Well, honestly, he could not have done that vocal take many times.
Yeah, that
when he's
scream
getting
at
to
the
those
end.
5 years at the end, it sounds like his throat is tearing. Like he's coughing up blood afterwards.
Yeah,
You got to do that on the Friday evening take where you give yourself a break over the weekend.
But also, if you are ingesting a lot of cocaine, that really numbs your throat, so you kind
I
of
can
can't
imagine.
feel it
Yeah,
a little bit.
that's
You know?
probably.
I don't think he was into the coke just yet, but I think he's just about to get to it when he goes on tour and becomes a superstar, to be fair to
Yeah,
him.
fair enough.
But he was known for single takes on both lead vocals and harmonies. We'll get to that in the next story.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
I do feel like we got to mention the Sue George recordings at some point here. So this is as good a time as any from the Wes Anderson movie Life Aquatic. Are you guys familiar?
Yeah. They're beautiful.
Where he's a Brazilian musician who has translated or semi-translated these songs into Portuguese, and he's singing them with just an acoustic guitar. And it's a part of the movie, and I think it just happened kind of serendipitously. But he's also a relatively famous musician in Brazil, and then they ended up doing a whole album of him. So I just remember him doing this song specifically and thinking it was really cool.
Yeah, there's another version of him of his that we'll talk about later on that I particularly like as well. But he's got like a great deep voice that I think gives this song a little bit of heft as well.
Well, and he's really good at delivering that sort of like bossa nova swagger. Like it's very authentic.
Well, this is one of the songs where I'm not in love with his vocal treatment on this song. I don't think it's bad. I just don't necessarily think it's the best version of Bowie's voice, and intentional or not, I kind of don't really care. It's more about the presentation of what it is. Again, I don't think it's terrible. I just found myself like maybe thinking that he could have done a different treatment, and I would have liked it better. But overall, I really do like the song. I have one, I'm not even going to call it a complaint, just an observation. At the beginning of the song, those echoed lines where he's like sighing, I don't know why they did that. I don't dislike it, but it doesn't feel like there's a hole that needed to be filled there or anything like that. And a lot of those choices are done because you're like, oh, we need something to carry that through for a second or something. And it didn't seem like that was the case. And so I just found that to be maybe an odd choice and something that I feel like if I had heard it without that and then you put that in, I'd be like, oh, no, it doesn't need that. You don't need, just take that out. It's a little distracting.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it lives and dies on the emotionality. And I think there's 2 big emotional climax songs here on the record at the front and the end. And I'll pick this one, but I like them both a lot. And they give me a blast of emotion whenever I'm intently listening to them, I would say. So in that sense, they're successful to me every single time.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I haven't been listening to this song for 30 years in a row, so it was good. It's a kick-ass way to start your album off. You know, that he goes near the end there where he is just unloading for track 1. It's kind of cool.
I have a question. Maybe somebody can tell me what the line, your face, your race, the way that you talk means. I don't know any other way to interpret that other than what it says.
Yeah, he says some other questionable things here. To be honest, I always heard that line as your face, your ace. Like, you're ace, baby. You're great. I always thought that's what he was saying.
The innocent version.
But the Spotify lyrics support what you're saying, so I noticed that this week as well, Tom.
Yeah, it seems a lot. And I'm in no way impugning David Bowie, and I'm not saying he's a racist in any way, shape, or form. I think he has a rich history of standing up for black musicians and has done a fantastic job of that, and, you know, was married to Iman forever. But also, you could be the most virulent racist in the world, and you still be like, well, I mean, but she's pretty fucking hot, so you know.
I mean, he's supposed to be an alien, so if he's coming down and observing that different people sound different, you know,
Human
nothing-
race.
A human
There we
race.
go.
Yeah, there's nothing inherently
Say you're not a
evil about
lyrics
that.
guy, Adam.
That's a good point. He is talking a lot about humanities. That actually could fit.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, let's keep it rolling along here to the next song on our focus list for this side. It's called Moon Age Daydream.
I'm an alligator. I'm a mama, papa coming for you. I'm a space invader. I'll be a rock and rollin' bitch for you. Keep your mouth shut. Just walking like a big monkey bird. And I'm busting up my brains for the world. Keep your electric on, baby. Put your ray gun to my head. Press your space nose to my love. Freak out in a moon age daydream, oh yeah.
So should I talk about the lyrics or the panning first? Which one do you guys want to talk about?
Oh man, I've got a great lyrics hypothesis here, guys. This is it. Let's do
Let's
it.
hear it. Let's hear it, Phil.
All right, so, man, okay, so you guys, you're gonna have to wait for this. This is a good one. Okay, so he's an alligator. He's a mama papa coming for you, right? Chariots of the Gods came out in 1968. This popularized that we are all aliens, right? So he's an alligator. He's a mama papa coming for you. So he's a reptilian. And he's the mama papa. He's the creator. He's the alpha and the omega. He is a reptile coming from space. He is both your creator and your invader. And then later he says, keep your mouth shut. You're squawking like a pink monkey bird. The pink monkey bird is the Hamadryas baboon, which was considered a manifestation of Thoth. It was a sacred animal in Egypt. This is the bird-headed god, Thoth. He's Ra's advisor, the inventor of hieroglyphics and science.
Wow. So he's a lizard person and also tied to ancient Egypt, and so aliens. Okay.
Can you imagine writing a rock and roll song and starting it with "I'm an alligator"? That's so awesome.
Pretty badass.
I love it. I love this song.
Oh, this song rips really, really hard.
The song does rip really hard, but we do have to talk about the panning. First of all, panning compliment. All right. The drums throughout most of the song are amazingly panned in a way that gives you a sense of like three-dimensionality of the drum sets, because he'll be doing a drum fill and like certain toms will be on the right side, certain toms will be on the left side, and you get the sense of a drummer like go cycling through the toms. And first of all, I don't even know how they recorded that, because how do you get the isolation on the mics? We're not getting cymbal sound and snare everywhere on the mics. It sounds really great. It's a very, very cool way to, again, give you that sense of space in the mix. But then at like 155, they basically just shift the whole drum sound to the right channel, and it stays there throughout the rest of the song. And that makes no fucking sense at all. Like, why would you do that? You already gave us this like cool, big, roomy mic feel, and then you switch it over to just one side, and I could feel the lack of it in my left side every time I listen to it.
And it's interesting, Tom, it's interesting to bring that up because that's actually a really cool transition point in the song where they go to that little horn arrangement thing.
A little slide
yeah.
whistle
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you make a great point that doesn't come back to center.
No.
It's almost like they're supposed to turn all the knobs when they're like doing the master, and they're like, fuck it.
Yeah, they just forgot about it.
Yeah, just gonna let that one ride.
This is during the harmonized keyboard and guitar and sax solo section.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
There might be a
part.
penny whistle in there too.
Right. That's what I was looking for. Penny whistle, right.
When that low sax comes in, it's so cool though, right?
How can I fit baritone sax into this rock and roll song? Well, this is the coolest guitar song on the record, and I just want to say for anyone who maybe hasn't dug deep into Bowie's catalog, this song sounds the most connected to the whole of the Man Who Sold the World album. which he did with mostly the same band 2 albums previous. And it's like the heaviest, most guitar-y version of David Bowie, which is cool.
This solo that starts at like 3:15 blasts.
Yeah, he's great, dude.
Totally.
He's really good. And he's playing the piano. I keep wanting to mention that. And he's doing the horn arrangements. So that guy was really a great third man kind of player. Like, he's covering a lot of ground. I think even the piano, and guitar is clearly his main instrument, and he sounds great on it. But the piano playing is like minimalist, rhythmic. It's very effective.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that I liked about this album is that on the first side of the album, I feel like you're getting a lot more Mark Ronson. And then side 2 of the album, like Trevor Bolder really gets a chance to shine on side 2. And the bass really kicks it up a level and becomes the sort of main focal point of the songs. Like, I just wanted to get that in there because we haven't talked about Trevor Bolder yet, but I think that for at least side 2, he is the star of side 2 of the album.
I agree. He gets off some great. I really do think the whole band gets some good moments throughout the record, and they just sound like a tight band. They have been playing for a while at this point, and they seem to be kind of used to Bowie's arrangement style, and yet they still continue to write interesting arrangements. You know, they take these relatively simply constructed songs, chordally at least, and they're able to find their ends. And what you end up hearing on a lot of the tracks, less so this one, we'll talk about in other tracks, is where the main rhythm instrument other than the drums is Bowie's acoustic 12-string. And that's kind of like holding down a rhythm, and it frees up the guitar, lead guitar, and the bass to do more melodic interplay stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah. So I remember hearing stories about David Bowie being the kind of guy who would just like call the band at 11:30 on a Wednesday night and be like, be at the studio in 20 minutes. We're going to fucking record. And like, I'm wondering if that was the case for this album or not, or because if you're telling me that they got like 2 takes, hear the song, play it one time through, then you get a take or 2, and they just got called like from the dinner table out of nowhere to come in, that's pretty impressive.
I don't think it was quite like that at this point. And we're going to talk about it in the next episode's story. Fame definitely changes him, and he's not famous at this point. What he is ambitious, and perhaps on this record for the first time, he's very sure of what he wants. But I get the impression they were keeping a little more of a regular schedule. Now, I did hear from the guys in the band that thing about 2 takes max, both to learn it and to record it, which they weren't comfortable with, but that's how Bowie liked it. He liked him kind of on the edge of their seat. That could have been an exaggeration because they had been touring for a little while. The songs and the sessions from this record and the previous record, Hunky Dory, pretty much blend together. They're almost part of the same sessions. So that's a little up for grabs, but I don't get the impression he was wielding his rock star status in that way that you're describing yet.
Interesting. It is also interesting to hear that he was that confident in his vision because he was working with Ken Scott, who was a fucking dude. Like, that guy was not some naive new producer that was like, whatever you say, I don't really have an idea or a vision. Like, Ken Scott was a guy. He worked with fucking everybody. And so I could see that you'd have to have a lot of confidence in yourself and your vision to come in and say, no, I know what I want, and this is what we're going to do, to a guy who's been on, you know, some of the biggest records of all time.
Yeah, again, it seemed like Ken Scott, the producer, and he gets a co-production credit with Bowie. So I think that's meaningful, given that this guy already had a resume. But I'm pointing out that the band, and I think Ken Scott had been working with Bowie also for the last 2 records, maybe only as engineer at those points, but they all kind of said, no, this was the first time that he acted really confident and was just like, that's the take, that's it, moving on, we're doing this now, I'm picking up the saxophone now, chop, chop, chop. Okay. Let's keep it rolling here, guys. Don't want to be here all night. The next song, we've already played a clip of it at the top. It is called Starman. This week, Starman was a last minute, hey guys, I don't hear a single, and then Bowie went home and wrote it real quick, and they recorded it last.
No way.
Wow.
I mean, it's a pretty killer song, I gotta say.
That's so interesting because I'm going to suggest that Starman and Lady Stardust are sort of connected in this way, both lyrically and musically. But if you're saying like, oh, I don't hear a single, I gotta write one more. I mean, maybe it makes a little more sense. Like maybe he like subconsciously lifted something, but yeah, I mean, if there's no story, there's no story.
I mean, to be fair to him, he worked fast and he was turning out songs consistently all throughout the 70s. In fact, I learned this week that he also wrote and they recorded versions of Rebel Rebel for this record, and that didn't pop up on a record until like 3 albums later. They were burning through material quickly and then deciding what was best.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, I have to say, this is by far the biggest hit. It still is one of, I think it's the second most played Bowie song on Spotify after Under Pressure, his collaboration with Queen in the 80s. It jumps out to me as a hit right away. Like, they did the right thing by releasing this as the single.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I've played this in bands before. I've like played, and it definitely always got like an audience response. I just also didn't learn of this song until later. Like, to me, it always seemed like a deep cut or something. Maybe just because it wasn't being played on terrestrial radio in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, right?
No, it is odd because I had my introduction to David Bowie, harkening back to something Adam asked about, was a greatest hits comp called Changes Bowie. And it had Space Oddity, it had Ziggy Stardust, had Suffragette City, it had a bunch of other of his hits throughout the years, right? That you would think of. Fame.
Heroes, probably.
Heroes was on it, exactly. But it didn't have Starman.
Huh.
So you're right, I did think of it as a deep cut, even though it is definitely the most successful song off this album.
Interesting. I wouldn't have picked it as the most successful song off the album, not because I don't like it. There's an oddness to it that I would think maybe audiences wouldn't quite be able to get through. You know, when you get to the chorus is clearly a very catchy chorus. But I feel like you wade through some non-catchiness to get to that chorus, and I just don't think audiences have the patience.
I think you're hitting on why it is, though, with that comment. I don't think it even matters what you do in the verse. If the chorus opens up big in a major way, because it does the thing where it's in a minor key, feeling like a minor key in the verse, and then it opens up big major in the chorus, and it goes really high, it's triumphant, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
I'll save this for Lady Stardust on the next episode, but the songs are connected. And Tom, I think this speaks to that sort of like dissonance you're talking about. They're connected through this weird, like, Lydian Sharp 4 Jurassic Park sound, and we'll talk about it in the next one, but like in some ways the intro to Starman and the intro to Lady Stardust are the same.
You mean we didn't just talk about the Lydian Sharp 4 Jurassic Park sound?
Oh no, I've got a little more I can talk about.
So we're going back to dinosaur days and ancient Egypt in the same podcast.
That 12 string, when it's way out front, sometimes sounds like there's a little crunkiness in some of those strings and it's not all the way tuned.
I agree with that.
Well, there's a drone. There's some drone that the song starts with that makes you feel very uneasy. Like it's a note that's not in the key. Like it's sour. There's something dissonant.
Yeah.
When they come back to that open chord. And I don't know if, Phil, that's that crunk note that you're talking about.
Well, yeah, I mean, it likely is, yeah. Like, essentially, like, the opening chord here is a B flat. It's a B flat to an F. And then the note, the pedal tone is an E, open E, right? So over the F, you get an F major 7. It's a pretty beautiful, lush chord. But over the B flat, you get this weird chord where you've got a B flat, and then you've got the sharp 4 on top of it, which only exists as the fourth of the F scale. The fourth, when the B flat's the fourth of the F scale, and it sounds crunky.
Yeah.
So I wanted to mention one thing melodically that I do not know if David Bowie intended, but it seems like he might have, and I heard this as retrospective analysis. There's a connection in this melody to the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And now that I've heard it, I can't unhear it.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, Starman Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Yeah, wow.
It's that octave jump in particular, right, that recalls it. And there is sort of a thematic connection a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that Starman, like, lyrically to me, sounds like someone yearning for the Starman. It's a human who's wanting to have his mind blown.
Yeah. I mean, I guess at the time, it was probably maybe a little after like the sort of alien UFO craze that was happening in like the 50s or something like that. But that would have been something he grew up with. It was the, the explosion of like, oh, there might be men on Mars and aliens and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Low budge sci-fi TV things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Again, raised by TV. Yeah.
All right.
And now that we've heaped all that praise, let's move on to the last song for this side on our focus list. It's called It Ain't Easy.
Family song or something like that.
That harpsichord thing, or the clavichord, whatever it was, very odd.
Yeah. He was apparently known for just walking around the studio and picking up random things and going like, let's try this, and then just messing around with it for a minute and getting it.
Yeah.
And it would blow the other musicians away, but he really fond of doing that. So that's probably what happened with that auto harp.
I had an experience with Adam once where he came to pick me up for band practice in college, and he picked up a mandolin, and he kind of went ding, 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 ding. And then he just started playing Battle of Evermore, and I was like, whoa, you can play mandolin? And he was like, no, I've never picked up a mandolin in my life.
So the harpsichord on this song is played by Rick Wakeman, which is out of control. Like I said, that's like renting a limo to go grocery shopping. Like he's doing nothing, and they're like, "Yeah, let's have Rick Wakeman do that."
That's hilarious. It's a great call.
It's 3 chords. Yeah,
so
okay.
to be clear,
Yeah.
Rick Wakeman had just quit the band. So he was close friends with the guys. Rick Wakeman is the piano player, keyboard player on Hunky Dory, on Man Who Sold the World, and so he would have been buds with these guys.
Yeah, maybe that's why he quit. He's like, you can't have me just continue to hit 3 chords
can't
like
just
this.
do this.
Have you heard what I can do?
I'm not wearing one of these costumes.
But he does wind up wearing that costume on some Yes album.
It was completely
tour, right?
unavoidable. Yeah.
It always comes back around. So I put this on as my low point on the record. I honestly don't completely hate it. I mean, it has a little life in it, but it's the only cover on the record, which I hadn't realized previously.
Oh, it's a cover.
Yeah. The guy who made it originally is a guy called Ron Davies, who's sort of a country singer. It's pretty similar to this arrangement, making it a useless cover. And adding to that, Three Dog Night also did a version of it before David Bowie, and even titled their album after it. And it also feels very similar arrangement-wise, save for the harpsichord, perhaps.
I feel like the vocals on this one are particularly thin in terms of Bowie's vocals on the verse. And it's even worse because then the chorus gets real big and it's super beefy, and then it goes back to this thin, nasally high vocal, and it just kind of can't carry the song through. And for the audience members out here, I realize how much of a psychopath this makes me, but I found this song unlistenable because right at the beginning on the left channel there's this, like, I don't know, weird, oh wait, hold on, am I talking about the wrong song here? I think I'm talking about the right song. I should have made this complaint about Starman. It was a complaint about Starman. There's literally a second.
You can register that complaint now.
Well, there's like literally a second where they have like an ambient guitar sound at the beginning of Starman right on the left side. And he's not playing it all the time, but you can hear the ambient sound of the room. And then right before the song really kicks in, they unarm the track for like a second. And so this ambient sound that's been in your left ear just drops out for a second. And then the whole thing kicks in. And I'm like, fuck, why'd you do that? Just like the ambient sounded for another second. What's wrong with you?
Probably wasn't intentional. For all the intentionality I think Bowie applied to that, that was probably a mistake.
Yeah, you probably couldn't hear it. If you're listening to it on vinyl, particularly, there's that warmth,
Right.
that crackle. But when you're sterile in headphones, it's...
So I thought the song doesn't really work, doesn't really fit with the rest of the tracks, either in theme or in approach. It just feels tacked on. And Bowie does seem to have a weird fascination with doing one cover per album. He doesn't always do it, but I did read something interesting, which is that they had done a version for this session, for this album. They had done a version of Chuck Berry's Around and Around as well, and they ultimately dropped it in the track list for Starman at the last second, which just seems that they were even considering that just seems bizarre.
I know. Oh my God. Yeah. Wow.
But okay. Well,
wait, Rob, are we going to vote now? Or are we going to wait till
no, there's no voting.
another cliffhanger? What?
No voting?
We're streamlining, baby. Now, since we still got side 2 to reckon with next week, we're not going to vote today. But I was analyzing the sacred scrolls instead.
Okay.
And I thought it would be fun to answer a couple of questions on everyone's minds.
All right.
The first being, have we gotten softer over time? Meaning, do we pass
I think that's a clear yes.
more of the albums? Well, I'm not talking about our testosterone levels.
Hey, man, I'm on T replacement or whatever that is.
TRT or whatever, yeah, right.
Do we pass more of the albums that come our way versus in the early days of the podcast? So I did some analysis. So it sounds like you guys think the answer is yes. Well, the short answer is yes, but not as much as you might think. To be honest, we've stayed pretty true to our origins. The global rate of us passing albums is 67% over the whole 200 episodes. And that is only 1% higher than the first 50 episodes.
Whoa.
That's pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah. I would say that we're getting the votes the same. I think we're coming in a little less. I'm just going to immediately shit on this because it's not my kind of music. And that might be why people are perceiving us being softer. Trust us, we still hate a lot of stuff. And
I will also admit that I'd like to think that our taste has expanded a bit through this exercise. That was part of the goal of the exercise. But more importantly, it's what you said, Tom, that I feel a little more sympathy to all the artists, even the ones that make music that I absolutely hate. And I think it is fair to give them a fair shake in the sense of just describing what they were even aiming for. And only then talking about how they failed.
yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Okay, I did a couple more of these. They'll go by quickly, and then we're going to round this episode out. Question 2. Which complainer is the most stingy with their yes votes, and which, in turn, is the most magnanimous?
It's either me or Phil that is the most stingy.
Oh, Marty's pretty stingy.
We're going to go with the people who are here because in true friendship fashion, if they're not here, fuck them.
But I agree. It's gonna be tight between me and Tom.
I think it's Phil. I think it's you because I've been on more episodes, and I think that I've probably had more opportunities to vote yes.
Pretty sure I said no to Metallica's Black album.
I know you guys haven't seen the numbers, but you are so right. And to be clear, I controlled for how many total votes you have. We're looking at a percentage of yes votes or no votes here.
Excellent. Well done. I would expect nothing less from you, Rob.
So you are right. You guys are pretty much neck and neck within 1.5% of each other. But Tom is the most stingy with his yes votes.
Most
Nice.
discerning.
He's giving under 60% of the albums he votes on a yes.
Spoiler alert for this
And
album.
on the other end of the spectrum, no real surprise here, is Adam with a 72% positive rate.
Yeah. That checks out.
Listeners, just so that you know, none of this is an act. I am by far the biggest asshole of all of the friends that we have. And Adam is one of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. He's genuinely a good person. And I think I might genuinely be a bad person. So, the numbers all
No,
tick
I
and
don't
tie.
believe that for a second.
Okay, I have one more bit of data here before we close out part 1 of Ziggy Stardust. Question 3. As you know, audience, we all grew up together and our tastes have plenty of overlap, so you'll often find us voting together in a block. However, I went back and took a look at the times throughout all 200 shows where one upstart, one rebel, has stood up to the tyrannical majority and voted against the grain. So my question to you, and I have counts, which of us here tonight has done that the most times in our show's history? Who is the most willing to buck our collective peer-pressured opinion?
I'm going to say Rob. I think it's you.
I think it's Phil.
I'm back to me or Tom. Yeah,
You're all wrong.
it's Adam.
It's Adam by a long shot.
Oh wow!
So I'm simultaneously the most yeses, but also flying in the face of the consensus.
Everybody else says it sucks. And Adam's
Yeah, and I'm
I
like,
don't know,
I
man.
like it.
Hoop Snack's pretty good.
I think what happened there is that every time Adam does the research, he feels so much sympathy. It's the sunken cost fallacy. He has to vote yes, even though it's crap.
Totally true.
Adam did this 17 times.
Damn.
The next
Wow.
one in line is Tom at 7, who I would normally consider
Jesus.
the most immune to
Yeah.
peer pressure.
That's impressive.
Now, interestingly, audience, I noticed that over the more recent spate of episodes, Tom's been doing this more and Adam less. So that's right. You guessed it. It finally happened. We broke Adam's spirit.
It only took 200 episodes and 4 years.
Okay, look, audience, we want to move on to side 2. That'll be coming up for you next week. We're going to skip mailbag this week to keep this taping at a reasonable length, but please keep sending us whatever is on your mind. And by doing that, joining our growing mailing list. We love you. We read everything that comes over. It all means a lot. And as I said, next week we'll be covering side 2 of Ziggy Stardust, including the continuation of our story about how Bowie assembles the spiders from Mars achieves rock god status, and then quits to do cocaine in Philadelphia, amongst other things.
Sounds like the Avengers.
Here's to another 200, gents. Congratulations.
Yeah, right back at you, boys.
For everyone here at 1001 Album Complaints, I've been Rob.
I've been Tom.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Phil.
Boosh.
I'm a bush invader.